In my own way, I'm a believer. In my own way, right or wrong. I don't talk to.
So, my general topic, as I said, is country music. My specific topic is religion in country music. Now, first, I want to make a distinction. Let's see, is this the laser? I want to make a distinction between religious country songs and music and country music that is religious. So we're going to do some introductions. Like I said, the difference between religious country music and country music that is religious. The former is being represented by the Christian Country Music Association, or the CCMA, and the latter by the Country Music Association, or as we all know, the CMA. This distinction is important to our examination of religion within contemporary popular country music because it is one that is fervently maintained by the music industry. Given the religious origins and subtext within mainstream country music, our first assumption might be that both musical institutions would make natural and complementary allies. However, the fact that in 2002 the CMA filed a lawsuit against the CCMA accusing it of impinging upon its trademark suggests otherwise. The CMA's complaint underscored the, quote, likelihood of confusion among consumers, the media, and the industry that could potentially threaten the CMA's name. CCMA President Gene Higgins pointed out that while other associations and organizations use similar names, it was the CCMA that was specifically targeted. The CMA's lawsuit and the CCMA's targeting suggest the mainstream industry's anxieties towards what it sees as the blurring of religious and secular lines within the music industry. These anxieties are mostly economic, which is important for us to remember. David Makachek, a contributor for an online journal called Religion in the News, points out that, quote, the assumption in much of the country music programming world is that products that are too narrowly evangelical are decidedly unpopular, that is, limited in appeal to a narrowly defined market niche, and songs that get too preachy are unlikely to get much airplay. Thus, the secular country music industry aims at producing songs which have a highly generalized form of piety and consequently have the largest consumer base. Any threat to the blurring of secular and religious lines is thus met with industrial fears, hence the CMA lawsuit. In addition, the tensions work both ways, as religious artists, such as Amy Grant, who move into mainstream country music, are considered by the religious community to have sold out. The phrase's suggestion being that a religious artist has traded their spirituality for monetary gain. This sense, Natalie Maine's anti-Bush comments resulted in a widespread backlash against the band and their subsequent movement to mainstream pop music. Despite secular industry fears of becoming too preachy, there seems to be a relatively recent increase in the amount of country songs released with religious themes, as well as an increase in the levels of overt reference to God, Jesus, and the Bible. Joe Carter, a writer for First Things, an online journal published by the Institute on Religion and Public Life, points to a recent examination of 60 popular country songs of 2010, which reveals that faith and family are recurring themes within the musical genre. Fathers are mentioned in 10 of the songs, mothers in 7, and children in 5. 6 of the songs allude to marriage. Mentions of prayer, preachers, church, heaven, and God are heard discussed in 3 songs, and the Bible is named in 1. Although 23 of the 60 songs include at least one of these themes. That the music world still considers religious content to be a peculiar, stating, quote, the willingness of country music to talk about God, family, and other topics counted among the most important in people's lives is still considered by the industry to be aberrant. Carter essentially questions why most secular music doesn't adequately reflect what he sees as the values of the population at large. Why does the distinction between secular and religious country music even exist? A fully articulated discussion of this topic would have to include other attitudes of popular culture, which view religion as a personal topic, for example, rather than a public one. Although an intriguing question, is beyond the scope of this presentation. In addition, my discussion will not focus on a survey of country music history, nor possible reasons for the recent increase in this religiosity, but rather on contemporary expressions of the divine within its message. More specifically, I want to illustrate how the industry as a whole and individual artists maintain, cross, or blur these lines between overtly religious music and mainstream secular songs. It is my hope that my presentation will successfully illustrate these strategies and then allow us to apply this knowledge to other forms of cultural religious expression that seek to do the same. Part 1, we're going to look at the themes of religious country music, as opposed to the form. What are some of the messages or main motifs within a country song in general, specifically religious? Keep in mind that what we're talking about here is country music in general. They all sort of follow a very similar format and form, but the religious country song is a specific subgenre, if you will. Now that we've differentiated secular country music from religious and looked at their complementary yet antagonistic relationship, we're ready to examine the elements and themes that make up the discourse of country music as a whole. I will be drawing from most of my information from Maxine L. Grossman's 2002 Jesus, Mama, and the Constraints on Salvific Love and Contemporary Country Music, which I can make available to anyone who would like to read that. It was very intriguing. She does a very thorough job. In her informative and thorough essay, Grossman analyzes the language and rules that govern ideas of salvation within mainstream country, and how this idea becomes the goal of both overt and subtle uses of religion. For Grossman, salvation through love is created through relationships between people or between people and God. The love itself is most commonly accomplished through personal sacrifice and transformation. It is this structure which most strongly signals the Protestant Christian background from which country music sprang and the theological parallels to Christ's personal sacrifice and transformation through his resurrection. According to Grossman, the ideology of country music works on 4 basic assumptions that also parallel Protestant underpinnings. Number 1, the human condition is one of imperfection. Humans are sinful, and on account of their sins and imperfections, they suffer. Sometimes the suffering is innocent, such as child abuse, and sometimes it arises from a person's own actions. Cheating on a lover, stealing from strangers, lying to oneself. The suffering may be material, such as jail time, but more often it is spiritual, the heartache of losing the person one has hurt just one time too many. Number 2, the only solution to the sufferings of the human condition comes through a personal transformation. Such a change of state may be effected as a one-time radical break from past transgressions, as when the love of God or Mama or a good woman or good man allows one to see the light and mend one's ways, to be baptized by the Spirit of God or love, or God as love. The third ideological element is the sacrificial transformation occurs only when a connection is made. The connection may occur between lovers, but it also may occur in the love that a parent feels when considering a child, or the love that an adult feels looking back on his or her parents or grandparents. The connection may take the form of empathy by recognizing the suffering of other people, or by reaching out to alleviate their pain. An individual can experience the same sense of connection. It can also take the form of personal realizing that a person realizing that they are loved, or that his or her place in the world does matter to God or Mama. The fourth and final one is that the transformative quality must involve some element of sacrifice. Just as the cross provides the gospel tradition with a symbol of the ultimate divine sacrifice, so does the secular country music tradition identify a host of sacrificial symbols, both human and divine. For example, legions of long-suffering wives remain faithful to the wandering husbands in country songs, just as countless parents sacrifice unselfishly, or soldiers sacrifice their own lives to protect their countries. We will now look at two songs that epitomize all four ideological, theological assumptions. They both could be considered overtly religious, given their direct references to God, heaven, or Jesus by the cross. These two songs are Randy Travis's Three Wooden Crosses, 2002, and Mark Will's Don't Laugh at Me. Okay. I'm glad you enjoyed that. Not the reaction I was expecting, but that's fine, however you want to do it. Okay. So, I'll talk about the song for a second. The song's narrative contains assumptions of the imperfection of humanity and the necessity of suffering through the deaths of the presumably innocent preacher, teacher, and farmer. All three affirm the song's main theme of giving back or sacrificing, and the list of the families and students left behind testify to their goodness. However, it is left up to the more sinful of the bunch, the hooker, to contain the bulk of Grossman's four assumptions. Her salvation is confirmed through her transformation from prostitution to upstanding citizen, like her dead cohorts. This transformation transformation could be read as emanating from her near-death experience if it were not for... Oh, it's the bell. Sorry, I thought it was playing. If it were not for the knowledge of the preacher's last words and the bloody biblical gift. It is this personal connection that actually initiates the hooker's transformation. She is shown love both from the preacher and presumably later as she is touched by God. Her sacrifice comes from giving up her lifestyle, raising her child to understand her own life lessons, her commitment to God, and ultimately her own death. The song's moral implies a strong sense of sacrifice as well when it valorizes the building of family, friends, followers, religious connections, etc. that one leaves in this life. Leaving something behind always implies sacrifice. However, what is important is the reward one gets for the payment. This reward, like Christ's promise, is salvation. The song can also be said to promote a strong sense of evangelicalism. When leaving something behind implies the souls one has saved. Thus, the preacher becomes the hero within the story because of his potential for leaving behind the greater gift, making a larger sacrifice. Second song we're going to look at is on your handout, I think. Is it? Okay. Don't Laugh at Me by Mark Wills, 1998. The song's invocation of humanity as imperfect is quite striking, given that the bulk of its three-verse structure contains several different voices, all expressing their physical, mental, and social abnormalities. The song's pathos stems largely from these undeserved defects, even when they are results from decisions. Thus, the teenage mother is the single mother whose situation is made worse by the absence of an irresponsible sperm donor. The homeless man is a victim of depression suffered from the results of a random chance. Just as in Three Wooden Crosses, his family is killed by reckless drivers who, quote, crossed that yellow line. Each bears their deformities through the sacrifice of social rejection, such as the, quote, kid who's always chosen last, or the kid that's called the geek, or the superficial abnormalities such as the girl with crooked teeth. In the case of the homeless man, he has sacrificed both his material comforts and his mental capacities. This issue of each character's sacrifice seems to be problematized if we consider that it was not a conscious choice. However, similar to Christian virtues of, quote, bearing the cross or the trials and tribulations of Job, the sacrifice is always rewarded either later in life through God's reward for piety and fidelity, or in the afterlife through eternal salvation. The song evokes the latter in its chorus when it states, quote, someday we'll all have perfect wings, suggesting a heavenly reward as well as a divine transformation. Each character's desire for personal connection is inherent in their emotional petitions of "don't laugh at me," meaning don't connect with me on a superficial physical level, but on an emotional and spiritual one. The song's video displays this idea of interpersonal connection by contrasting the initial instances of ridicule, abuse, and disregard to the characters' suffering with their eventual connection to their ridiculers. Thus, the bullied kid reads a book with his now transformed tyrant. The tormenting girls now take on an interest in the teenage mother's infant. The overlooked homeless man is given a sacked lunch by the formerly snobbish pedestrian. The song's structure should also be noted. The chorus's refrain seems to represent a more childlike voice in its word choice and structure, as its appeal, "Don't laugh at me," seems to echo from a schoolyard setting. Nevertheless, the song is structured so that the characters increase in age. Thus, the song begins with the young kids on the playground, then moves to the teenager, and finally to the homeless adult. This progressive movement is an important one, as we will see in developing an effective rhetorical strategy that is common in many country songs. Part 2. Formal structures of the religious country song. So we've looked at the thematic aspects of this, what kind of themes do they have within them, and now we're going to look at how these things are put together, because they have a very conventionalized form that the average listener may not pay attention to as we're paying attention to the beat or the melody or whatever. The formal structures of country songs in general, religious or not, are highly conventionalized. Although there are always variations within these forms, the most prominent and typical form among them, among religious songs, is the verse-chorus type. This form is generally made up of a series of verses that provide the song's basic storyline, while the chorus sums up the song's main message. There are normally 3 verses, each having separate functions. Verse number 1 sets the scene of the song's narrative or description and establishes the setting of the chorus or main point to follow. Second verse normally extends or expands the narrative. Third verse offers a reinterpretation of the narrative or a transformation of its basic message. Because of the third verse's function of transformation, it makes it a fertile and appropriate site for religious country songs to reaffirm or emphasize their spiritual message. And as we'll see, the songs, and all the songs that we look at, the third verse, if they have them, will be that site of religious transformation, suffering, and that's what they use it for. In addition, narrative patterns seem to fit one of 2 forms. Pattern number 1, which is typical. The song concentrates on a single individual, locating him or herself first in childhood or adolescence, then in adulthood, and finally in the context of some life-changing experience. Pattern 2 introduces a variety of characters rather than a single individual, but presents them in a gender-balanced succession. For example, the song may describe a man or boy in verse 1, and then a woman or a girl in verse 2, before concluding with a description of a married couple or humanity more generally. A good example of pattern number 1 is Tim McGraw's 1994 hit single, "Don't Take the Girl." Its 3-verse chorus follows the pattern well. As you can probably see if you followed along that sort of fits pattern number 1 perfectly for its verse-chorus pattern. It also, its themes of personal, spiritual transformation and sacrifice are strongly evident. In fact, it was this song that I heard, when did this come out? 94. After, it wasn't in 94, but this was the song that made me think, man, this sounds like every other country song. There's like a pattern here, because the chorus, "Don't Take the Girl," which he uses to connect all 3, seems forced in some instances, like when the robber, the mugger is trying. So I don't know. That sort of got me interested in the country music structure form. I knew there had to be some kind of form. Anyway, the opening verse introduces a small boy. He pleads with his father not to invite a neighbor girl to go fishing with him. As the description of pattern number 1 suggests, verse 1 introduces the prepubescent main character in his selfish attitude towards sharing his father's time. The second verse places the same old boy, same sweet girl in the late teens. This time they're on a date, and the mugger kidnapper attempts to rob them both. The protagonist, rather than being a hero and attempting to subdue the attacker, pleads with him to take his money and his grandfather's watch, but just don't take the girl. Thus, the second stanza has expanded the narrative by characterizing both the couple's growing relationship and the boy's changing values. He now values his girlfriend over his personal possessions. The third verse ups the stakes considerably when it situates the now married couple in a hospital as the woman is giving birth to their child. However, there are complications, and she's dying, of course. And now, fully grown man prays earnestly to God to take his own life instead of his wife's. Thus, the protagonist's transformation is complete. However, his change again must come with a sacrifice, his wife's death. Although he pleads with God to save his wife and he expresses his willingness to sacrifice himself, there is no sense of tone of anger towards God or for his wife's illness. Rather, there is a characterization of God as a limited divine entity. It would seem that God has the power to save her from death, yet not the power to intervene on her behalf beforehand. However, this apparent contradiction is justified when we consider the song's message, which is not about sacrifice, but personal transformation. This message aligns itself with the theological readings of God as providing burdens or quote-unquote opportunities for personal growth. Many Protestant Christians do believe that God sets them up for personal growth through intentionally introducing hardships into their lives, which they must overcome in order to reveal their faith and to grow as humans. The next song we're going to look at that follows the same pattern is Steve Warner's Holes in the Floor of Heaven. The song follows the same 3-verse chorus pattern. The boy grows up and gets married. However, his wife dies suddenly. His mother's reminder about the rain gives him comfort as he grieves. The third verse completes the song's cycle of life at his daughter's wedding. Although saddened by that her mother missed this important event, the man is comforted again as it suddenly begins to rain. While the song contains many instances of sacrifice and suffering, its focus is less on spiritual transformation and more on finding divine meanings within earthly signs for the purpose of comfort. The man does seem to change as much as he maintains his faith through a reassuring image. The song seems to echo John 14:1-6, when Jesus describes a similar type of comfort to his followers. He says, "Let not your heart be troubled. Ye believe in God, believe also in me. In my Father's house are many mansions. If it were not so, I would have told you. I go to prepare a place for you. And if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come again and receive you unto myself, that where I am, there ye may be also." Oh, that's a train. I keep hearing crap over here. Similar to Christ's reassurance, the song exemplifies one of Christianity's strongest appeals, being reunited with deceased loved ones in the afterlife. A third one which I have, but I don't want to show you. I'll just talk about it. I don't have much to say about it. It's Buddy Jules' "Help Pour Out the Rain." Everybody ever heard this song, "Help Pour Out the Rain"? Yes, like that one. Okay. Well, it continues the rain as heaven baptism motif. Buddy Jules' 2003 song follows the same 3-chorus pattern. Verse-chorus structure is it follows a father whose daughter asks him what heaven is like. She adds such asides as, will she see her grandfather or don a pair of wings? But more importantly, can she help God pour out the rain? During the third verse, the narrator is putting his daughter to bed when he drops to his knees and begins to pray, making positive affirmations about, quote, coming home to stay and meeting Jesus face to face. Because the third verse's function is for transformation of the character or characters within country songs in general, it proves to be an important spiritual place for religious country songs. These varying degrees of personal transformation do occur within each example we have looked at so far, and as expected, it is within these third verse spaces that the songs focus their religious message, or at least make their most overt religious reference. Additionally, Grossman points out that while this verse-chorus formula allows for specific narratives, quote, the songs also provide a universal insight into the human condition. This universality, in turn, allows for an extremely wide range of narratives so that almost any relationship, a pattern of relationship, can serve to structure a three-verse song. Grossman enumerates some of the many possibilities. The song may trace a single relationship, father, daughter, mother, son, husband, wife, through three successive stages. Or it may highlight one character's experience of three different but parallel relationships. A man and his father, the same man and his son, the man and God. The song may also work through stereotype categories to present an intentionally universalistic message about humanity, bravery in everyday life, the soldier, which we see a lot, the mother, human struggle, a homeless man, a crack-addicted baby, culminating in a third verse moment of transformative redemption, the cross, the salvific love of Jesus. What is important to note about mainstream religious country songs' tendency to universalize their message is that there is usually an attempt to keep this religious message very subtle. Thus, God is reduced to a voice in heaven or the cross. Don't Laugh at Me, for example, reduces angel wings to Christianity's claim to universal salvation. The Three Wooden Crosses distills the virtues of evangelism, while Holes in the Floor of Heaven suggests that the existence of God is reaffirmed through natural phenomena, or maybe his bad flooring design. It's the only joke I put in there, so thank you. While country music in general may be religious, the industry presents itself as secular overall, mostly for economic reasons. Like many modern religions who have watered down their message, removing fire and damnation, country music must contain a broad universal appeal along with a specifically Christian message to ensure a healthy profit margin. For this reason, it proves extremely flexible in its content, adopting and adapting more secular modern virtues such as self-love and self-interest. To take two other Tim McGraw examples, his Someday You're Gonna Love Me and Live Like You Were Dying both reaffirm the importance of self-love and self-actualizations. Like any other, the country music industry adjusts to changes in the marketplace, and recent acknowledgement and proof of the large consumer base within the religious demographic will ensure that country music, at least for the foreseeable future, will remain Christian at heart, even when its religious message fluctuates from overt to subtle, trying to adopt and adapt more secular notions and themes. Country music does prove to be an extremely versatile discursive form, like religion itself, that is capable of changing to exist even while it promotes a constancy of values and authenticity. For some Q&A. Yes, ma'am.
I have a question. So,
yes.
I'm wondering if there's a gendered element to this?
Yes.
I noticed you just presented songs performed by men.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if they're all written by men. But have you also looked at songs written or performed by women? And do you see the same pattern? Do you see something different that's notable in relation to religion?
Well, as far as gender goes with the artists, the majority of them are men. mostly because the majority of country music artists are still male. But as far as specifically differences, of the ones that I sampled, I would say maybe maybe one or two were female, and I didn't notice any distinctions, any differences between that and the male. Now, as far as gender characterizations within the song, yeah, there are very interesting things that go along with that. For example, normally Jesus and Mama are combined into one person. Mama is the one who sacrifices because there's sort of a space for her. There's a religious gendered space in Protestantism and in country music discourse for a female character. Now, the father, on the other hand, has a little bit of a hard time because there's already a masculine space filled, that being God, the Father itself. So he sort of takes on a sort of a different role in that sense. But I haven't noticed a difference in the artists and how they. To be honest, I haven't done enough survey of them. I think I have. What I have? Oh, I've got Jesus Take the Wheel. It's the same formula. I have it, but I mean, but it follows the same formula. The industry isn't going to really stray very far from it, regardless of whether you want. Now, I can't imagine there being any difference, but I haven't seen it, to be honest.
I'd imagine there's a difference. I would challenge you to go there and look at that.
Okay.
Look at female artists.
Martina McBride's Concrete Angel, because that's the one I've got. That's the first one I thought of, and I was trying to remember the verse structure, because I think that the last verse, I think little girls like beat to death. So I guess it would be.
What? Did you say beaten to death?
Yes. It's about child abuse.
Okay.
It's something about child abuse, but I think it's heaven. But I guess it's like an affirming thing. But I would be interested in fitting the words from that song into the formula.
Might have something to do with Tim McGraw too. Faith Hill also.
I can think of one popular country song that had heavy religious themes that didn't fit the formula at all. In fact, it was the only one that I can think of that also talks about, like overtly talks about hell. That's something like to avoid in it. And that's the song "Long Back Train." Came out like
Josh Turner.
yeah, it came out like 03, like 2003. I got it pulled up here. But like, if you look at the lyrics from it, it's all about like the long back train is just a metaphor for hell, and it's all about avoiding it. Like that's the whole song, and it did get a lot of contemporary country play. But that's the only one I can think of, and it doesn't.
There have been
and it was an outlier. It was a weird song at the time because it was so overtly religious, and it was also like it didn't fit any formula for the other stuff that you talked about.
Well, let me explain something in case somebody gets the impression that I'm trying to apply this to every country song, because what this is a normative study. Of course, there are going to be exceptions to it. If you have any examples of any ideas of how feminine songs are different, I would love to hear some examples. But I haven't personally seen anything because I don't think the industry would allow it as a discourse. But of course, there are always exceptions to the rule because you have to work on standardization, product standardization, and differentiation at the same time, which has always been a dynamic that runs almost every form of popular culture. And so that's how you get new forms. But I think as an industry, I would be very surprised, but I'd be very open to examples of it.